So it's been about a month since Dauntless The Awakening launched, and needless to say, it's been met with a fair amount of criticism and controversy. So whether you're a player who's currently enjoying the update, maybe you hate it, or maybe you don't really care either way, if you care about the future of this game, then you cannot ignore the sheer number of negative ratings, reviews, and the concerning stats in terms of the concurrent player base. Now, I've shared my thoughts on this update already, and many of those thoughts were actually fairly positive. I could see exactly what the developers were trying to do, and I'm enjoying various aspects of this update. However, despite that, it's clear to see that there's some glaring issues that developers need to take back to the drawing board with. I also sympathise with much of the disgruntled player base in terms of all the content they lost and all the hours of grinding that they've put into the game only for it to be taken away. So that's exactly what we're going to explore today. We're going to look at some of these glaring issues and how I believe that some of the fixes may right some of the wrongs, and hopefully it gives us an idea of what the developers would need to do to ensure a future for Dauntless. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. Okay, so the aim of this video is not to create any arguments in the comment section below, nor is it to add to the relentless hate which the developers have received since the release of the Awakening update. No, the purpose is to share my concerns for the future of Dauntless, to share the constructive criticism from within the Dauntless community, and hopefully offer somewhat of a guide for the Dauntless devs or for anyone else who wants to contribute towards improving the future of Dauntless. To achieve this, we're going to split the video into three parts. Firstly, we're going to talk about why I have concerns about Dauntless's future, and why the devs need to act now to preserve that future. We're then going to talk about what are the major critiques from the Dauntless community about the Awakening update. To do this, I've gathered information from Steam reviews, from YouTube videos, and from within my own comment sections from the player base. And then finally, I'm going to present my thoughts on what the dev team should do to ensure they can build trust within themselves and the community, and to ensure that Dauntless can consistently move forward towards the future. One thing I want to make very clear before we get started is I do not condone at all a lot of the hatred which has been aimed towards the Dauntless dev team. Although I'm finding a lot of enjoyment from this update, I can see that there is glaring issues which need to be tweaked, and I can understand the passion from a lot of the player base and why they would be quite frustrated of all the changes which have happened. If there's one thing I've realised from this Awakening update, is the passion that players actually have about this game and how much it's actually meant to them. A lot of anger has been heavily exaggerated in my opinion, though a lot of the constructive criticism has merit, and it just shows how much people actually care about the game and just want it to succeed. It's also clear to see some of the blood, sweat and tears which has come from the developers that they have poured into this update. Despite the fact that on this channel I've criticised various aspects of this Dauntless Awakening update, I've also shared what I enjoy about it, and unfortunately by talking about some of these positive aspects I seem to have attracted quite a lot of hate-fueled and stupid comments from a lot of hate-fueled and stupid people. Thankfully it doesn't bother me in the slightest, but I want to make one thing very clear. At time of recording, I am not affiliated with Dauntless or Phoenix Labs in the slightest. I am not a partner and my thoughts are my own, and this channel is purely a hobby, sharing things that I like to talk about. So if you happen to come across someone enjoying a game or enjoying a hobby, don't be an idiot. Keep it civil. With that all said and done though, we can't ignore the criticism, and changes are needed. So first we need to look at the concurrent player base, which peaked astronomically when Dauntless Awakening launched and then plummeted shortly after, and has continued to drop since. Establishing exactly what the concurrent player base for Dauntless is has always been difficult because it's on so many different platforms. There are sites online where you can get an idea, however I would take them with a grain of salt because they can be very outdated and inaccurate. So let's just look at the Steam charts for example. Now like myself, many people from within the community and probably including the devs themselves were very excited for the Steam launch of Dauntless. Now I wrongly predicted that Steam would be a huge benefit for Dauntless in terms of the player base because it would offer another set of players from one of the biggest stores that there is in gaming. And this seemed to be the case initially when the update first dropped, because as you can see here, an all-time peak about a month ago when the update dropped, there was 3,221 players playing at one time for Dauntless on this one gaming platform, not to mention all the other stores like the Xbox, the Switch, the PlayStation and Epic Games. And this was always bound to drop after the hype died down, but looking at the current players right now, there's 156 players on Steam currently playing Dauntless, with 165 being a 24-hour peak. That is an astronomical drop from the 3,500 we saw just 1 month ago. Now I know this is just one platform, and as I said, it can be very difficult to find out the overall concurrent players for Dauntless, but it does serve as a clear image of the decline following this update. I can imagine on Xbox, PlayStation, Switch and Epic Games, we've seen a drop in players across the board. If I was to predict, there's probably only a few thousand Dauntless players logged into the game right now, which is nowhere near the kind of numbers the devs were probably hoping for when they launched this update. Now it's not just the number of players which is a huge concern. The number of players is influenced not only by people's personal opinions but also the opinions of others, and as you can see here in the Steam store, that Dauntless has an overwhelmingly negative perception in terms of reviews. Now it's fairly typical that when review bombs take place, as is the case here, that many people jump on the bandwagon, which further bring down the overall score. However, a lot of these reviews come from people who give very detailed descriptions of why they're leaving a negative review, and with that many detailed negative reviews there must be merit. And currently at time recording, Dauntless is sitting at an overwhelmingly negative perception with only 246 positive reviews and 1,263 negative reviews, which is very, very poor. I can imagine no matter what the devs do now, overcoming this deficit will be almost impossible. You don't just have to look at Steam reviews. If you type Dauntless into YouTube, most of the recent videos uploaded would also present this overwhelmingly negative feedback. And it's even more concerning when even the biggest content creators are sharing this negative perception.
With it, so they fixed that. Honestly, the only thing keeping the game playable at this point, because my goodness, the game is just unplayable. I was very motivated to play the game with Awakening, and the state of it just made me hilariously unmotivated to do anything.
Now, believe it or not, there's probably much more positive opinions out there than you would actually think. However, angry people shout the loudest. And when there's review bombing going on, and when there's very popular content creators sharing negative opinions, people jump on that bandwagon, whether they've actually got strong opinions on the matter or not. Now, I'm not saying everyone with a negative opinion has jumped on a bandwagon. There are glaring issues, there are serious things that need to be tweaked and changed with this update. Not to mention all the progress and content which was taken from veteran players. But what I am saying is there's more positivity out there than you would think, and probably even more people who are just indifferent and don't really care about the update at all. So these are my concerns. The concurrent player base has dropped dramatically and continues to decline, the reviews are extremely poor, and even the most positive of Dauntless content creators now have a negative perception. Now, my opinion before the Dauntless update was that changes were needed, and I stand by that because the player base was already dwindling, and had there not been changes, it's very likely we wouldn't even have a Dauntless to be arguing about just now. It probably would have been dead and buried very, very soon. And this Awakening update was meant to be the saviour which was going to provide a future for Dauntless. In my opinion, I do enjoy many aspects of the update, however it hasn't hit the nail on the head. And with the drop in the player base and with the negative reviews, and now with the tension between the player base and the devs and other members of the player base, I can imagine it's going to be very difficult for Dauntless to establish a future. So what are the issues with Dauntless The Awakening? What do people not like about it? And there's some things here that I do agree with, however there's others that I disagree with. In a nutshell, the main and most consistent issues which are raised across the board seem to be the removal of older weapons, the limited options with new weapons, the poor way of obtaining new weapons, the overall changes to cells and how that's impacted builds as a whole, the lack of recognition and rewards available to those veteran players who achieved so much pre-Awakening update, the changes to the new and limited hunt pass systems as well as canisters, monetization as a whole, and finally the performance issues, the crashes and the bugs. The first major issue, which almost everyone talks about, is the removal of all the weapons. Imagine World of Warcraft, or RuneScape, or Elder Scrolls Online. Imagine the players who've grinded it out and collected a multitude of different cosmetics and weapons and upgrades that make their character in-game unique to them. Well, imagine there were server wipes and everyone lost that content. I can imagine that making mainstream news. That's how big a deal that would be to these players. And in terms of the weapons and the builds and the amount of reforges that people had during the Reforge era, that's exactly what's happened here. Yes, they've been rewarded with in-game crowns and in-game currencies and XP buffs, however I just don't believe that quite cuts it. The historic monster hunting formula of hunting behemoths, gathering their parts and crafting weapons wasn't broken, so why did they feel the need to fix it? Now this was something that initially bothered me quite a little bit, however I've overcame it and I'm now actually enjoying a lot of the new weapons. I find myself using more variety of weapons in terms of repeaters, hammers and chain blades, which were weapons I never touched before. I usually stuck to an axe, a sword or a warpike. But this is an example of justified frustration. The developers warned us for about a year and a half that they were going to be doing this. Some people didn't read up on it, some people were left completely unaware, and when they were caught by surprise on the launch of the Dauntless Awakening update, no wonder it caused frustration. But as I stated, we were warned about this. This is something they stated very early on following the announcement of Dauntless Awakening. So naturally taking away everyone's hard-earned weapons is the first thing which has infuriated many people. Moving on from that, we have the current pool of weapons and the means of getting new ones. So when the player base booted up Dauntless the Awakening, they were greeted with 7 unique weapons available through early questing. That then expanded to 11 more unique weapons, which altogether is only a fraction of the weapons which were on offer prior to the update. Now personally I enjoy many of the new weapons and I found myself varying up quite a lot. I'm using much more weapons and much more variations than I did previously. And some of the abilities that these unique weapons have are very impressive. But naturally, as you'd expect, taking away a lot of the older weapons and a lot of the unique abilities they had, especially the legendary weapons, is going to frustrate many of the players and it's going to interrupt their capabilities with those weapons. And having much fewer weapons available now is another issue. In addition to this, we now have weapon tokens, another in-game currency, something that I'm pretty unhappy about. Weapon tokens are used to obtain weapons through the in-game store. Each weapon in the store costs 100 weapon tokens. The currency does not expire at the end of the Hunt Pass seasons, and they can be obtained through the following sources. You can get 25 from the free Hunt Pass track, you can get 75 from the Elite Hunt Pass track, and you get 10 per week from weekly challenges. There's bundles of 25, 50 and 100 available to purchase in the Dauntless store. And not only are you able to purchase these in the store, but that's where you buy the weapons with these weapon tokens. So yes, you can obtain weapons by just simply playing the game, however it's going to take an enormous amount of time. It's not even a grind, you just have to wait. You're going to have to wait a week to get a very small amount from the weekly challenges, and then you're going to have to wait for each Hunt Pass, which is going to take a huge amount of time. Naturally, so many people, if they're going to want weapons, they're going to have to buy it, which is not good practice. Now I'm going to get to the solutions to some of these problems in the very last section of this video, however it's very clear to see that I believe, and many others out there believe, that this currency just simply has to go. This is not a very good means for obtaining new weapons. I believe that weapons should be crafted from obtaining parts, or at the very least you should be completing quests to get these weapons. It's very unimmersive and having to go through the store to obtain new weapons, not just if you want to buy weapon talents, but just to even purchase the weapons with the weapon talents, is very unimmersive, it can be very expensive, and it's very unfair. Now I've said it many times before, free games require us to buy things from the store, or they require us to buy hunt passes. It's acceptable, I understand it. To keep the lights on, to keep the servers going, they need our money from time to time. But currently at time of recording with the Awakening update, if you wanted to play this game, get new weapons in your arsenal but didn't want to put any money in whatsoever, you're going to have to wait about 10 weeks worth of weekly challenges if you wanted to unlock a new weapon. Now another issue which people have talked about quite a lot is the changes to cells. Some cells have been removed, most have been changed, and overall they've all been nerfed. Many players logged in following the Awakening update to find that their builds were completely obsolete now. Now this again is something that they warned us about, and it's something that hasn't frustrated me too much. I've managed to overcome it because some of these cells can create some very interesting new builds. One of the new factors which they implemented is that cells are destroyed when you remove them from a piece of armour. Now prior to the update and early on in the update, I stated this was something I was actually quite glad to see, because prior to Awakening I felt that we had too many cells and nothing really to do with them. I felt that because cells were going to be destroyed, they would be much more valuable and rewarding. So as long as the game made it easy enough to collect cells, then what's the problem? Well, from doing my research online from other content creators as well as the experiences I found that cells being destroyed limits the variety of builds that you're willing to create now. I came across one content creator who shared a very popular video about how Dauntless you now only have one build available to you because of this. And though I believe that it's a ridiculous over-exaggeration, to a certain degree it's very much true. I very much enjoy creating builds this update, especially support builds. There's a variety of great content creators out there who've created a variety of wonderful different builds. However, you'll find that when you want to create more than one build, because cells transfer between builds and because they'll be destroyed each time you remove them from armour, every time you want to change between builds, if you're using a similar armour piece between two builds, you're going to have to remove and then reattach cells to them each time you switch between them, which really limits your options and the variety of the builds if you want convenience. Dauntless Dauntless has always prided itself on the wide variety of different builds and the multitude of different ways you can take down behemoths or support other slayers. However, I feel that this deters people from doing this. People are only really going to want to create one build, which is a complete opposite of what the developers stated they wanted to happen when they were talking about this update in its earliest stages and right through last year. Another very popular issue which many people are talking about is the lack of recognition and overall rewards for veteran players who grinded for hours upon hours pre-Awakening update. Of course we got the 2 crowns which were up for grabs for the reforges you completed, we got some EXP boosts and a fair amount of weapon tokens, and after all the controversy following the Dauntless Awakening update, the devs dropped even more rewards for veteran players to try and appease as many people as possible. Next up, we have the Hunt Pass, and as was the case before the update, we have 2 tiers of Hunt Pass. We have the free tier and we have the elite tier, which you pay for. One of the things that caused quite a lot of frustration was the new repeaters, the Alluring Moons, which are locked behind the elite Hunt Pass. Now to be fair, it's just a temporary lock, and I understand to a certain degree why they've done this. With the Alluring Moons, they've essentially added an entirely new mechanic to the game in that you can summon fauna to fight alongside you. In my opinion, I really enjoy it for builds. I think it adds a very good new element. I know that the fauna running around during a hunt is frustrating quite a lot of people because they're getting in the way. The devs have stated that they're going to be addressing this, so there's going to be non-collision so you can run right through them. It shouldn't interrupt hunts much longer, however it is worth mentioning. Of course the Hunt Pass itself is lackluster. The decision to remove Platinum from the Hunt Pass, both the free tier and the elite tier, was a ridiculous decision in my opinion, but they've already stated they'll be reintegrating this with the next Hunt Pass. Further to this, it's fair to say the Hunt Pass as a whole is lackluster now. Pre-Awakening Hunt Passes consisted of Platinum, of bounty tokens, and various transmogs for your different weapons, for your armours, for lanterns, for banners, all different sorts. In fact, you would actually get 2 armours with older Hunt Passes. Now we just seem to get those Alluring Moon repeaters as well as a transmog for them, and various boring things like Aetheryte. You also get to unlock some of those infamous canisters. Now it almost feels like it was a last minute decision. The 2 armours which they currently have in the store, which are unlockable through opening various countless canisters, seems to be the armours that originally would have been included with the Hunt Pass. And even after completing the Hunt Pass, you're nowhere near gathering all the transmogs available with each armour set. This definitely feels like a plot to get you back into that store to unlock as many canisters as possible so you can get all the pieces for each armour. Now I decided to test this out because I had an awful lot of platinum that I'd saved up over the years. Now for the Deep Sea canister set, it's set at 300 platinum per canister. And to get all there was to unlock for that Deep Sea armour, for all the banners, all the bits and bobs that came with it, it cost in the region of around 3,000 to 4,000 platinum to unlock that. Now I'm not exaggerating when I state that's around about 30 to even £40 worth of platinum right there. It's a ridiculously overpriced system which I believe needs to be removed. And that then leads us to monetization as a whole. Dauntless has become very, very expensive. Yes, technically you can play to the certain degree without putting in any money, however you're only going to get so far unless you wait a ridiculous amount of time. Weapon tokens, if you want any new weapons, are pretty much going to become essential. And I believe they are ridiculously overpriced. Things like Dull, Shining and Peerless Aetheryte, yes it's good that they provide it on a daily basis through the store, but I feel like they've done so again to bring you to that store to see where you can unlock more things through purchases. You can buy the Elite Hunt Pass, you can buy into the new canister system, and then there's that really nice looking armour, which I thought looked great. I'm not against buying armour transmogs from the store, but this thing is so expensive and you don't even buy it with platinum, you buy it outright with money. Monetization in free games and MMO style games is not an issue in my opinion, and I feel like it's essential to keep these games online. However, as I've stated before, I feel like it's something you should do because you want to do it, not because you have to. I feel like we're reaching a stage in Dauntless where it's something that has become essential. The final issue that I need to raise is the performance issues, the bugs and the glitches. Now this is something that's always plagued Dauntless, and it's not something that's really bothered me in the past. It's something they're going to patch and they're going to tweak over time. However, the crashing currently has reached a ridiculous level to some points that I believe it's actually unplayable. Currently on PC I'm not getting too much crashing, but on the Nintendo Switch it's fairly constant. I'm hearing of other players who are playing on the PC and on console who can't get more than 5 minutes without crashing in game. But as I said, this jump to Unreal Engine 5 has caused a bunch of issues, but hopefully this is something that they can patch and tweak over time and doesn't cause us much trouble for much longer. So what are my recommendations? What steps do I think the developers need to do to rebuild the relationship within the Dauntless community? And do I believe that this is even possible at all? Well, first things first, let's create a visual representation which illustrates the current Dauntless player base's level of satisfaction following the Dauntless Awakening update. And to get our numbers, why don't we use the Steam user reviews? It doesn't paint the entire picture because obviously Dauntless is on many platforms, however it's the best we've got to work with. So in this graph, which I've artistically created, we're going to add in the 1,509 reviews on Steam which currently exist. A score of 100% would indicate that all 1,509 players who've reviewed Dauntless on Steam have completely and utterly adored the update, which we know quite frankly isn't the case. An overall score of 60 to 80% would indicate that the player base was enjoying the update, however there were issues that need addressed. A user score of 40 to 60% would indicate that the game is neither good nor terrible, pretty average. The overall score of 20 to 40% would indicate that the majority of players are not enjoying the update in the game and that there's many things that need improved on. And then we have 0 to 20%, which would indicate that the game is a complete abomination, and in my opinion there'd be absolutely no hope for its revival in any way whatsoever. So where is Dauntless sitting on this table? Well, at time of recording, of the 1,509 reviews which have currently been logged on Steam, Dauntless has 246 positive reviews and 1,263 negative, giving it an overall user score of 20.02%, which would place Dauntless right here on the graph. And judging by my calculations, and using my very poor method of measurement, Dauntless currently sits 0.2% above being a dead game for sure. So what do you think about that?
3 hours later.
So I think it's safe to say that the devs have their work cut out for them. So finally, what are my recommendations? What do I think the devs need to do to right some of the wrongs, if it's not already too late? Well, honestly, I truly believe that almost a complete U-turn would be the best course of action. Turning back to the Reforge system with some of the enjoyable content that we got, such as the new hunting grounds and the new behemoth, and some of the new things they have planned on the horizon, I think that would appease most players. But as we already know, the devs are not going to go down this route. This will not happen. So based on the assumption that we're not going to get our old weapons back, I think the devs need to prioritise the addition and consistency of new weapons. We know that new weapons are going to be added here and there, but this needs to be as frequent as possible, and the ability that these weapons have need to impress the player base. For example, the special ability which came with the legendary weapons back when Escalations came out, they were impressive at the time. And then with the Awakening update, you look at the Alluring Moons and the new mechanic which that brought, I think that was very unique and a really nice addition to the game. I think we need more things like this. However, I think the biggest patch which could be placed on the Awakening Wounds in terms of weapons is a new weapon type. The community have wanted a new type of weapon for a very long time, and there's been rumours here and there, for example, the bow staff weapon which have been talked about and shared throughout Reddit all over the place. I think it's now time to launch that weapon. I know that's easier said than done, but this would be a very welcome addition to the Dauntless community. Then of course we have the way of acquiring new weapons. Now, as I stated earlier, I truly believe that the weapon token system needs to be completely scrapped. The ideal scenario would be returning to the system where you hunt behemoths, you break their parts and you craft weapons, as we have always done. However, I truly believe again that this will not be the case. The current system of weapon tokens is not fit for purpose. It's a system which requires you to wait long periods of time, not just simply grind, with the hopes that players will speed up that process by simply buying weapon tokens from the Dauntless store. There's nothing wrong with free games and MMOs with big expensive servers looking to make money from an in-game store. However, I believe that it needs to be done in the right way. I believe if you can't craft weapons the old way, the new way should be that you obtain them through completing completing quests or rumours. No matter what, you shouldn't be obtaining weapons through the in-game store. It's not immersive in any way whatsoever, and it's truly, in my opinion, not good practice. Each weapon should have a quest or a rumour which builds up a backstory, provides some background lore and a bit more depth all round for each individual weapon, making it much more rewarding when you unlock them. Now the next thing's really quite simple, we have sales. Now sales always made a really big part of our Dauntless builds pre-Awakening update. Now assuming they're not going to be reverting to the old system as is the case with my other recommendations, simply comes down to the fact that new and unique sales should be added to the game on an ongoing basis with further updates. I can see what they were trying to do by having sales destroyed when you remove them from armour, however it can just become tedious and it limits the variation of your different builds. I think sales should no longer be destroyed and I think they shouldn't carry between builds so that you can make a good variety of builds. Giving you all these different build slots is completely pointless, for when you add or remove sales from one build it can affect the other. These are fairly simple tweaks which I don't think would be very difficult to implement, but would go a long way and make some improvements to the overall gaming experience. And then we move on to the lack of recognition for veteran players. Now many veteran players, including myself to a certain extent, will feel like they've had their entire game completely reset right in front of their eyes. And in many ways that's true. I think the crowns were a nice touch, I think they're nice to look at and it's good to see players running around using them. But there needs to be more. There should be armour sets exclusive to those who've reforged a set amount of times. I feel like there should be titles or gliders, hunter rivals or even emotes. I feel like the number of reforges you had, you should be able to display, much like we can display trackers. And one final thing I think some people might find unfair is that I feel that veterans should have early access to new weapons or early access to that new weapon type which I talked about, or even early access to new in-game content. Now that might open a whole new can of worms, some people might not be too pleased about that, however who they take into account as a veteran player could be tweaked, it could be re-evaluated in the future. There has been a fair amount of injustice towards veteran players who poured their hearts and souls and most importantly their time into this game for years, and I feel like they deserve more recognition for that other than what they've already been rewarded. Then we have new hunt passes and the canister system. First I thought that they should just completely scrap the canister system, however after thinking about it, I feel like developers do need to make money and this is probably an easy way to do so. So I feel like they should be kept to the side for those who actually want to enjoy them. I feel like they shouldn't affect things like the hunt pass, but currently they are. They've completely replaced the armour transmogs, the weapon transmogs and all the other things which used to make hunt passes unique and exciting to buy. They've already addressed the platinum issue and that platinum will be added to future hunt passes, and this was a very good step to take. But by re-adding all the transmogs which the hunt passes used to have, such as the weapons, the armours, the gliders, the lanterns and the emotes, hopefully this will make it much more enticing to buy again. And then we have monetization as a whole. Assuming they didn't remove things like weapon tokens, things need to be much more affordable. Things like weapon tokens and armour transmogs, weapon tokens more specifically need to be more affordable, because unless you want to wait months upon months to gain a new weapon, then you are essentially locked behind a paywall to progress through the game and get any new weapons at all. Then finally, we move on to performance, bugs and glitches. As I've stated before, these are issues which have always plagued Dauntless, however they've never been to this extent before. I've come across some of the most interesting glitches and some of the most frustrating crashes. And the frame rates I'm seeing on PC and Xbox are very poor, and Nintendo Switch it's not even recognisable anymore, the game is like a slideshow now. These are things that I can imagine the devs would have been working on and patching and fixing fairly soon, but they need to be prioritised. You really can't expect players to spend their hard-earned money on a very expensive transmog only for it to be completely invisible when you're using it, as is the case currently on Switch for most weapon transmogs that I am seeing. So, from the information that I've gathered online via the Steam databases, the concurrent players are concerning for Dauntless, and by gathering information via Reddit posts, YouTube videos and from Steam reviews, I've highlighted the main issues raised within the community. And then finally, I've shared some of my own realistic thoughts on what I think the developers could do to try and right some of the wrongs and to improve the relationship between themselves and the Dauntless community. Now these tweaks or improvements might not make everyone happy, and I think there's many people out there that would prefer a full U-turn and revert back to the old reforge system. But I think they're all realistic implementations which the developers could make to hopefully improve the game. But do I think this will happen? I don't know. And do I think there will be a future for Dauntless? I hope so. As a community, I hope we can work together to hopefully prompt the developers in the right direction, because it's a game that's offered us so many great experiences, and it's a game that we all hope to be playing and enjoying once again, right into the distant future. Until next time, see you later.